In the book of Colossians, chapter 3, verse 12, we read this. It says, "Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, and long-suffering." Before we can understand the context of that verse, we have to look even more outward. So Paul is writing this epistle, the epistle of Colossians, and he is writing to a church in Asia Minor, or as we know, modern-day Turkey. Now, before he wrote this verse, 11 verses beforehand, so chapter 3, verse 1 through 11, Paul was illustrating things as Christians that we ought to put away, things that we ought to take off. And what he's referring to is your former self, your former lust, your old habits, your sinful ways. Just as Jesus says to deny yourself, take up your cross and follow him daily, Paul is illustrating before you can grow in maturity, before you can grow in your sanctification, you have to put these former things away. Just as when Jesus would heal someone and say, sin no more, Paul is using this illustration, but even more detailed. He's saying, once you become a Christian, put away these things, get rid of these things. And then after, we can read in verse 12, which we just read, but it also carries on till verse 17, where Paul is telling us to put on these new things. So to understand a little bit more, when Paul is illustrating this, we have to remember that we cannot grow in our relationship with the Lord, but yet still hold on to our former ways. So it is important to understand these first 11 verses in chapter 3, that we ought to put away these former things, these former lusts, the things that held us in bondage, the things that keeps us away from Christ. We ought to repent and truly look to the Lord as our author and perfecter of our faith. And in doing so, as we are repenting, we put on these new things. And that is just what we read. It says, therefore, as the elect of God, recognize who you are, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, and long-suffering. And this is kind of a parallel to what we read in the book of Galatians when we read about the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. For when we put away our former lust and we begin to grow in our maturity, begin to grow in our sanctification, the fruits of the Spirit will become more evident in our life. For the more we grow towards Christ, the more those fruits will become evident. And that is a great thing for us Christians to look at, to be able to examine ourselves. So, what I want to encourage you today with is to go through Colossians chapter 3, especially if you're struggling as a new believer. Let's say you've got caught in backsliding. Just to get a little bit of grip, go through Colossians chapter 3 and look what you ought to do to put away the former things and to put on the new things, which is Christ. And that is what Paul is illustrating. I hope this message encourages you. Hope it inspires you. Have a blessed day.